right now, you're sitting there thinking about the thing that didn't work, the deal that fell through, the dream that crashed. But here's the truth: failure is not the end. It's the raw fuel that can power you further than any win ever could. In this video, you're going to learn how to turn your biggest mistakes into your greatest momentum, starting today. Most people treat failure like it's the final chapter. They hit a wall, and suddenly the whole story feels over. But here's the thing: failure isn't a wall, it's a mirror. It shows you exactly where you are, what you missed, and what needs to change. The problem is, most people look in that mirror and see shame. They see proof that they weren't good enough. They replay that moment over and over, dissecting it, beating themselves up, convincing themselves they don't have what it takes. And that's the real loss. Not the failure itself, but the story they tell themselves about it. If you reframe it, though, everything shifts. Failure becomes data. It becomes a feedback loop that's way more valuable than success. Think about it. When you succeed, it feels great, but you often don't know exactly why you succeeded. Was it your timing? Was it luck? Was it your preparation? It's harder to pinpoint, but when you fail, the lesson is usually clear, sharp, and direct. You know what went wrong. You know where the weak spot is. You can't dodge it because it's staring you right in the face. Reframing the fall starts with removing the emotional weight you attach to it. Yes, it stings. Yes, it's uncomfortable. But if you can detach the sting from the story, you'll start to see failure as one of the most honest teachers you'll ever have. Every fall contains a map. That missed opportunity. It's showing you the skills you still need to sharpen. That business idea that tanked. It's pointing out the parts of the market you didn't understand. That relationship that collapsed. It's highlighting the patterns you didn't want to acknowledge. Failure isn't telling you to quit. It's handing you a blueprint if you're willing to read it. Here's the trap most people fall into: they make their failures personal. They believe the fall means they are the problem. But here's the truth: the fall is just an event. It's something that happened. It's not who you are. When you make it about your identity, you lock yourself inside it. But when you make it about the process, you can step outside it, look at it objectively, and figure out your next move. That's what reframing is. It's pulling your sense of self out of the dirt and putting it back in the driver's seat. You can even take it further. Learn to get excited when you fail, because it means you're pushing into new territory. If you're not failing, you're not stretching. You're just repeating safe moves you've already mastered. And the truth is, playing safe will keep you stuck in the same place far longer than falling ever will. Every fall is a sign that you've moved beyond your comfort zone. That's the only place growth actually happens. And when you reframe the fall, you start to notice patterns. You realize you've been here before, not in the exact same situation, but in the same emotional state. You remember that time you failed before, how it felt unbearable, but you eventually climbed out of it stronger. You remember the skill you learned, the opportunity you found, the strength you didn't know you had. And suddenly, this fall doesn't feel like the end anymore. It feels familiar. You know you can rise again because you've done it before. The key is to break the mental link between failure and finality. Instead of saying, I failed, so it's over, you start saying, I failed, so I just got my instructions. The fall becomes a pivot point, not a tombstone. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what's next? And that shift in language, small as it sounds, changes everything. When you reframe the fall, you take back your power. Because power doesn't come from winning every time. Power comes from knowing that no matter how hard you hit the ground, you can extract the lesson, adjust your approach, and keep moving. The person who can do that is unstoppable, not because they never fall, but because they've learned how to fall without losing themselves in the process. One of the biggest mistakes people make after they fail is freezing up. They step back, analyze every move they made, and then get stuck in the loop of, what if I fail again? That hesitation kills more dreams than the failure ever could. The truth is, success isn't a straight shot. It's a messy, twisting process of trial, error, and adjustment. The people who win big aren't the ones who had a flawless plan from the start. They're the ones who kept running experiments until something clicked. Relentless experimentation means you don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect plan, because those don't exist. You try something now, even if it's rough, even if you're not completely sure, because action is the only thing that gives you real data. You can't think your way into mastery. You have to test your way there. Every experiment teaches you something: what works, what doesn't, what needs tweaking, and what needs to be thrown out entirely. And the faster you test, the faster you learn. Think of it like a scientist in a lab. They don't run one experiment, get a bad result, and then throw away the entire project. They adjust variables, change conditions, and run the test again. Over and over. They know that failure isn't a verdict. It's information. They're not emotionally attached to each failed trial, because they understand that each one is just a step toward the answer they're looking for. That's how you have to approach your own growth. Relentless experimentation also requires a level of humility. You have to accept that you don't know everything yet, and that's okay. Every time you try something new, you're opening yourself up to the possibility of looking foolish. That's the price of progress. If you're unwilling to risk embarrassment, you'll never find the moves that actually work for you. You'll end up stuck in safe, predictable patterns that keep you small. The beauty of experimenting relentlessly is that it removes the pressure from any single attempt. When you know you're going to keep trying different approaches, you stop obsessing over whether this one will be the breakthrough. You understand that every attempt is just part of a series. If one version flops, fine. You've got another version coming. That mindset keeps you from spiraling into frustration when things don't work right away. It also forces you to get creative. When you're committed to constant experimentation, you start to see possibilities everywhere. That strategy you saw in a completely different industry, you wonder if you can adapt it. That feedback you got from someone who didn't even like your work, you realize there's a nugget of truth in it that could help you improve. You start piecing together ideas from unexpected places because you're not fixated on doing things the right way. You're focused on finding your way. Relentless experimentation builds resilience in a way that pure planning never can. When you're in the habit of testing and tweaking, setbacks stop feeling like disasters. They feel like checkpoints. You stop labeling yourself as a failure just because an idea didn't work. You see yourself as a problem solver in progress. And that identity shift is powerful because it means you're not defined by any single result. The thing is, most people never tap into this power because they give up too early. They try once, twice, maybe 3 times, and if it doesn't work, they conclude, it's not for me. But the breakthroughs you admire in other people's lives didn't come from 2 or 3 tries. They came from dozens, even hundreds of iterations. And most of those iterations were invisible to the outside world. People only see the final polished version, not the mountain of experiments that came before it. When you embrace relentless experimentation, you're no longer just hoping for success, you're engineering it. You're running so many tests that it becomes statistically impossible not to stumble across something that works. You start stacking small wins, each one building on the last, until you have momentum that feels unstoppable. And by the time other people notice, you've already been in the lab for months or years, cooking up version after version, failure after failure, lesson after lesson, until your skill and your results are undeniable. Most people will do anything to avoid feeling embarrassed. They'll play it safe, keep their dreams small, and hide in the comfort zone just so no one ever sees them mess up. But here's the thing, embarrassment is proof you're in the game. If you're feeling it, it means you're taking shots, you're putting yourself out there, you're risking something. That's where all the growth happens. The people who seem fearless aren't the ones who never get embarrassed. They're the ones who stopped letting embarrassment control them. Owning the embarrassment means flipping the way you see it. Instead of treating it like a scarlet letter that says, I'm not good enough, you treat it like a badge of honor. You wear it as evidence that you're doing what most people are too scared to even attempt. Because the truth is, everyone has embarrassing moments. Every expert you admire, every person who's made it big, they've all had those moments where they looked clumsy, unprepared, even ridiculous. The difference is, they didn't run from those moments. They leaned into them, learned from them, and kept going. When you hide your mistakes, you hide your progress. Think about it. If you never take a swing in front of people, they'll never see you strike out. But they'll also never see you hit the ball. You can't build a reputation for skill or courage if you're constantly trying to protect your image. Ironically, the more you try to avoid embarrassment, the more fragile your confidence becomes. You start living in fear of being found out, of someone catching you in a weak moment. That's exhausting, and it keeps you playing life on defense. Owning the embarrassment is about switching to offense. You step into the spotlight knowing you might trip, knowing your voice might crack, knowing someone might laugh, and you do it anyway, because once you've felt that sting and survived it, you realize it's not the end of the world. The fear loses its grip. What used to paralyze you now just rolls off your back because you've been there before and you know you can keep moving. This mindset changes the way you handle criticism, too. When you're comfortable with embarrassment, other people's opinions lose their power over you. They can't weaponize your mistakes because you've already owned them. You're not hiding anything, so there's nothing to expose. You become bulletproof to shame. That kind of confidence is magnetic. People respect someone who's willing to stand tall, even when they've been knocked flat. There's another benefit. When you own your embarrassing moments, you give other people permission to be human. They see you take risks, stumble, laugh it off, and keep going, and it inspires them to try their own thing without the fear of being perfect. Your courage becomes contagious, and that's how you end up surrounded by people who are also taking big swings, which only pushes you further. Owning embarrassment doesn't mean you enjoy it. It means you accept it as part of the process. You stop trying to erase it from your history and instead use it as a reference point for how far you've come. That presentation you botched a year ago, now it's a funny story you tell before you nail the same presentation with confidence. That song you forgot the lyrics to on stage. Now it's the reason you practiced harder and delivered a flawless performance later. The key is not to bury those moments, but to integrate them into your story. Every great success story has chapters filled with awkward failures and cringe-worthy scenes. That's what makes the wins satisfying. They're built on the back of moments that could have scared someone else into quitting. But not you. You took the hit, felt the heat, and kept showing up. And with each embarrassing moment you survive, you stop seeing them as threats and start seeing them as proof you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Pain has a way of demanding your attention. When you fail, when someone rejects you, when life hits you with something you didn't see coming, it's like your whole body and mind lock onto that moment. The sting is real. It's not something you can just pretend isn't there, but here's where most people get stuck. They sit in that pain and let it turn into a story about why they can't move forward. They replay it, they nurse it, they give it more and more of their energy until it's no longer just an event. It's an identity. That's the trap. Channeling pain into progress means refusing to let that happen. It's about taking that same intense energy, the same fire that pain brings, and deliberately steering it somewhere useful. Pain, at its core, is energy. It's raw, it's unfiltered, and it's powerful. Left unchecked, it will burn you from the inside out. But redirected, it can fuel a level of action and growth you wouldn't have had otherwise. Think about moments in your life when you felt the most determined. Chances are, they weren't born from comfort. They came from a moment when you'd had enough. When someone doubted you, when you lost something that mattered, when you saw clearly that if you didn't change, you'd stay stuck forever. Pain is a wake-up call like no other. It snaps you out of autopilot. The problem is, most people just hear the alarm and roll over. The few who get up, who use that discomfort to start building something, that's where transformation happens. When you channel pain, you're not denying that it hurts. You're acknowledging it, feeling it, but refusing to waste it. You take the rejection and turn it into a reason to sharpen your skills. You take the loss and let it push you to prepare better next time. You take the heartbreak and use it to finally address the habits or patterns that were holding you back. You decide that if you're going to suffer, you're at least going to get something out of it. This requires a conscious decision because the default reaction to pain is avoidance. People try to numb it, distract from it, bury it under business, entertainment, or comfort. And in doing that, they waste the very thing that could have propelled them forward. Channeling pain into progress means doing the opposite. You lean into it long enough to understand it, and then you give it a job. You make it work for you instead of against you. The process often starts with a moment of brutal honesty. You have to look at the pain and ask, what is this here to teach me? That question alone can shift everything. Suddenly, instead of asking, why me? You're asking, how can I use this? That's where clarity starts to form. The pain stops feeling like a punishment and starts feeling like a signal, a message telling you where you need to focus. Once you see it that way, you start moving. You throw yourself into training harder, learning faster, showing up more consistently. Every time you feel that sting again, you don't run from it. You remember why you started. You let it remind you of what you're building toward. Pain can be an anchor if you let it hold you down, but it can also be a motor if you hook it up to the right system. It also changes the way you look at future setbacks. Once you've experienced the process of turning pain into progress, you stop fearing it so much. You know that even if something knocks you down, you'll be able to squeeze something valuable out of it. That doesn't make the hurt disappear, but it makes you dangerous in the best way possible. Because life can throw blows at you, but none of them will stop you for long. Channeling pain into progress isn't about being cold or pretending you're unaffected. It's about refusing to let pain be wasted. Every time you take a step forward with that fire still burning in your chest, you're transforming it. You're alchemizing something that could have broken you into something that builds you. And the more you do it, the more you realize that pain isn't just a signal of something gone wrong. It's often the exact thing that gives you the push you've been avoiding. Most people lose because they want the win right now. They want the success, the recognition, the payoff, all on their first or second attempt. And when it doesn't happen, they decide it's not for them. But the truth is, big results aren't built in a moment. They're built over seasons, over years, sometimes even decades. Playing the long game means shifting your focus from immediate gratification to inevitable growth. It's about seeing your journey as a marathon, not a sprint, and understanding that every step, good or bad, is part of something bigger. When you play the short game, every failure feels catastrophic because you're measuring yourself against a single moment in time. You miss the deal, you lose the game, your project flops, and you see it as the end. But when you're playing the long game, you see that same failure as a small scene in a much bigger story. You know that one bad chapter doesn't ruin the entire book. In fact, sometimes those bad chapters are the exact ones that set up the biggest wins later. The long game forces you to develop patience and discipline. It's easy to show up with energy for a few days or even a few months when everything feels exciting and new. But it's another thing entirely to keep showing up when the excitement fades, when the results are slow, when nobody's watching or clapping. That's where most people quit, not because they can't do it, but because they can't handle the quiet, unglamorous grind that comes before the breakthrough. Playing the long game means embracing that grind as part of the process, not as something to escape from. It also changes the way you measure progress. In the short game, you're only looking for big, obvious wins. In the long game, you celebrate the small, quiet wins that nobody else notices, the ones that stack up over time. You notice when you've gotten just a little better than you were last month. You notice when you handled a challenge more calmly than before. You notice when the work that used to exhaust you now feels easier. These small shifts may not seem like much in the moment, but they compound. Over time, they create the foundation for the massive wins. Playing the long game also requires resilience, because the journey will test you in ways you can't predict. There will be seasons where you feel like you're moving backward. There will be stretches where your effort doesn't seem to be paying off at all. This is where most people break. They see a lack of immediate results as proof that nothing is working. But when you've committed to the long game, you understand that these seasons are temporary. You're not here for the quick dopamine hit. You're here to build something that lasts. Another thing about the long game, it forces you to think differently about strategy. You stop chasing trends, shortcuts, and overnight fixes because you know they won't hold up over the years. You start focusing on fundamentals, the skills, the mindset, the habits. That will still matter 5, 10, 20 years from now. You stop trying to look impressive in the moment and start building in a way that makes you undeniable in the future. It also gives you an edge, because most people simply won't stick around long enough. In any field, the majority will give up when things get too hard, too slow, or too boring. But if you're willing to keep showing up long after others have walked away, you eventually become one of the few still standing. And when the opportunities finally show up, and they always do, you're ready to grab them, not because you got lucky, but because you've been preparing for years. The long game isn't always fun. It's not always glamorous, but it's where the real rewards lie. When you commit to it, you stop chasing instant results and start building lasting impact. You're no longer just trying to win the moment. You're setting yourself up to win the years. And when the years take care of themselves, the moments take care of themselves too. Failure isn't the end of the road. It's the fuel that can take you further than any easy win ever could. When you reframe the fall, you stop seeing it as a sign you're not enough and start seeing it as a map for your next move. When you embrace relentless experimentation, you keep testing, learning, and adjusting until something works. When you own the embarrassment, you take away its power to hold you back and turn it into proof that you're in the arena. When you channel pain into progress, you refuse to waste the energy of hardship and instead convert it into action that moves you forward. And when you play the long game, you rise above the need for instant gratification and build something so strong it can stand the test of time. It's not about never falling, it's about what you do when you hit the ground. Every misstep, every setback, every painful moment can either break you or build you. The choice is always yours. The moment you decide to use failure instead of fear it, to turn it into fuel instead of letting it drain you, is the moment you stop being at the mercy of life and start becoming the one steering it.